Hey folks, James Green here. Back to do another briefing breakdown today about the future of networking, and I'm excited to have this chat. I've had a chance to be briefed by our guest today before, and I thought it was really interesting, so I'm excited to share it with you today. Before we get started, I want to introduce you to the other folks on the shows. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, so let's start with you, Scott.
I'm Scott Lowe. I'm CEO and partner at ActualTech Media, and I work with James. And we did have an opportunity to brief our guest a couple weeks ago, and they're doing some pretty cool stuff, and I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Great. And Adi.
So, hi, thanks for having me. I'm Adi Ruppin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ananda Networks.
Great. So what we're going to be talking about today is sort of a different way to think about networking. And I think it's, I'm going to put words in your mouth here a little bit, but thinking about where networking is headed. You're kind of, is it Gretzky saying, I'm skating to where the puck is going? Like, I think that what you showed us and what you're going to show the audience today is your bet on where networking is headed. And so I'm really excited to talk about that. Before we dig into the slides and the demo, do you want to just talk about a little bit at a very high level, the paradigm and why you decided to build what you've built?
Sure. Yeah, so a bit of context here. So I met my co-founder a couple of years ago, and between me and him, we've started 10 different companies, all in the networking and cybersecurity spaces. And we were both kind of frustrated with our respective fields because there's so much, so much done, but it's so much, more symptomatic and addressing symptoms rather than really addressing the core problems. And we're trying to think, how can we do something more meaningful? And then really what we realized is that the problem lies with how the internet was architected back in the 60s. And if you think about it, when nobody was then thinking about security, nobody was thinking about performance, nobody was even thinking of how to take two separate networks and connect them together. So what we kind of took upon ourselves is, can we rebuild it the right way so we don't need to patch it up for it to be useful for us. And this is basically kind of the background to starting Ananda.
Perfect. So the premise of the briefing breakdown is to expose the audience to a version of the briefing that Scott and I have already had, and you've agreed to do that with us today. So why don't we jump over to the slides and we can get started. For everybody watching, if it seems rude when we jump in here and interrupt Adi mid-presentation, that's kind of the point here. We're going to try and have a little conversation and hopefully ask some questions that those of you watching might have. So go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, that's fine. Jump in anytime. So let me kind of give you a very brief background of what we do and leave some time for questions. So, as I said, the core starting point for Ananda was realizing that the internet was not designed for what we were trying to do with it. And, security, performance, connectivity, that's all basically something that requires us to use band-aids or patch it in order to do business on it. And that's why we need firewalls, that's why we need VPNs, that's why on the networking side we need SD-WANs and MPLS, and then you have like CASBs and NACs and you name it. There's so many acronyms that you can throw here. And if you really think about it, the reason we need all those is exactly that design, that original design from the 60s. And as a result, it's very slow. We need to use all these multiple solutions, jump through all these different hoops in order to make things work. It's not as secure as it should be because orchestrating a lot of different moving items is never a good idea as far as when security is concerned. And at the end of the day, it's complex and costly because I need like 10 different solutions to just do the basics that you would have expected the network to do for you. However, it doesn't. So this is kind of where we've come from. And to aggravate the situation even more, with COVID-19 and everything that's happening, there's a really growing generational shift in everybody working from home. There's, the increasingly distributed, clouds, containers, IoT devices. So basically, everything's an edge right now. There's no perimeter. it presents even bigger challenges than before. And a lot of the tools that, even the patches that I mentioned, like the firewalls and the VPNs, were kind of designed to address the situation before, and not so much this increasingly distributed enterprise. So this is where we are right now.
I'll jump in and ask a question here. I think this idea of this being a generational shift is really important, I think, in what you're talking about. And it seems like some of this was workable up until the point where everybody started working from home. We had these sort of pods on the internet that we called our corporate networks that took the place of a lot of these communication links that we didn't have to worry about on the internet. We could guarantee fast speed, we can guarantee connectivity because it was all internal. But all of a sudden one day, with a sledgehammer, we hit corporate environments and we sent everybody home and expected the same kind of outcomes, and it hasn't happened. I think this idea of this being a generational shift is one that is really important in understanding why we didn't worry about this as much necessarily before. And obviously there was always a need, but at the same time, it's become front and center over the last few months for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is that, at the beginning of the pandemic, people were like rushing to buy secondhand Cisco ASA VPN routers and whatever they could get their hands on to meet the capacity. They were, but now they're kind of trying, what's the right way of doing this, right? They have some more time to think. And a lot of the other investments, SD-WAN, for example, that's another hot space. That's great, but it's mainly addressing you in the branch, at the headquarters, trying to connect. Great, but what happens when you're home? So the entire kind of equation changes, and you need to solve for different things.
Before you get going again, I have a comment, and I don't know, you may want to comment back on this or maybe not, but I was thinking about, on the last slide, you mentioned that we've kind of just put Band-Aid on top of Band-Aid on top of Band-Aid, and I was noticing the parallel between that in the networking space and how that happens in businesses. You're an entrepreneur, you said you've built like 10 companies before this. It's like something happens, and then you say, well, okay, we need a policy for that. So then you have a policy, and then, we need some paperwork for that. And the next thing you know, you're this massive organization. It takes forever to get anything done. That's kind of what we did to the network. And it's really hard to undo unless you almost just totally blow that away and start fresh, at least from a mindset perspective, right?
Yeah. Or when you're coding a spaghetti code, if you've seen 20-year-old code with all the, it's not good. Yeah. So that's exactly so. So, having started between me and a co-founder in 10 different companies, we wanted to do something different. We don't want to just, do a little bit of our own patch, right? So we wanted to shake things up, and this is really a segue for what I was going to say. So it's time to do this differently, and basically what we've done is provided a service. We provide a service that allows our customers to create their own private networks on top of the internet. So these are technically they're overlay networks. Basically connecting all these distributed elements, the remote users, the branches, the clouds, the data center, really anything, as if they're on the same LAN, basically. So really abstracting this entire problem and just providing a LAN-like interface for our users, but with a few important differences between that and the LAN as we know it. First one is incorporating the performance aspects into it. So it's not only the same as the internet, it actually has optimized protocols, optimized routing. So it could be up to 20 times faster than your old VPN, which is incredibly important right now, as we mentioned. The second element is security. So again, we want this to be part of the network, not an afterthought, not something we need to patch it with. So, encryption, end-to-end, zero trust, which is also growing in importance. Segmentation is all part of that network layer we provide, rather than something they need to solve for after the fact. And kind of the byproduct of these two is, coming as this Ananda motif here, simplicity. If this one layer converges security and performance and everything that you need, then it's much, much easier to use for the admin to manage, and also for the end user to just use. And again, in these times, this is really kind of a timely thing to be offering.
What you mentioned there about end users, I think, is one of the keys to notice here, because when you're talking about building an overlay network that creates your own sort of networks on top of networks so you can build the topology you want, that's something we've been doing in data center networks. But when you start including all of the users and the users' devices, that's sort of a new way to think about it, right?
Yes, and I mean, and also the implementation. And even VMware, NSX does that too. But the complexity in managing it, as you will see soon, is incredibly different. So there's a lot to do with the implementation. And just one comment I wanted to make just about our name, because it kind of relates to the motif of what I've been talking about, is that the name Ananda is derived from this Sanskrit word meaning the internal state of bliss or happiness, or joy, basically. And where this came from is, we were thinking about the old solution like VPNs, and nobody's ever said that their VPN sparks joy, and I think most people agree with that. So, we want our network to be different. Again, we want people to want to use it because it's secure, because it's just faster, because it doesn't make your life harder, it makes them better. So this is kind of the principle, again, behind how we want to kind of change networking. So if you see all these yoga imagery, this is why. So if we kind of dig a little deeper, and then you can grill me on this. This is what we're trying to connect, basically, right? You have a data center, you have remote users, you have mobile users, you have branches, and then we have different clouds, right? And we have SaaS services. So, basically that's our distributed workforce or distributed enterprise nowadays. What we're doing today, like we mentioned before, is throwing a lot of different centralized solutions at the problem, right? Whether it's the firewall, the VPN, the SD-WAN, the CASB, the MPLS, WAFs, SASE, WAN optimizers. I can go on and on. So, right, this is what we do today. And, I've been part of selling these too. And really, to get from A to B, you kind of need to go through all these loops, all these hoops. Not a very, by any means, that's not the shortest, easiest way to get from A to B. I think you'd agree. And also many times you need to kind of terminate the encryption, and there are some security compromises you need to make when you're passing through all these different centralized solutions. So, as I said, this is why we believe things are slower and not as secure as they should be, because we are forcing our old centralized model on this decentralized distributed enterprise and trying to make it work. And so this is today. What we do, basically, we're trying to get the shortest path, the shortest, best way to get from A to B. In terms of security, in terms of performance, we just want to get the best route from any 2 points, and we apply this across the entire network. So basically, as you can see, it's a cloud managed network that connects all these different nodes that we want to connect. Data centers, again, branches, SaaS, clouds, and we kind of find the optimal connection between any of these 2 points that's secure and the fastest way to go. So basically, as you can see, it's unlike the existing solution, it's a distributed network. So any 2 points can talk directly. There's no need to put a proxy in between. There's no need to lengthen the route between them. So there's no type of backhaul. Go ahead.
A couple of questions on that. So you said that you can put any points between, you can connect any 2 points however you want. I mean, this is all configurable by the administrator. So it's not just once you deploy Ananda, all of a sudden everything's open, everybody in the organization. You've got tight rules and all that stuff around who can do what, where they can go, how what they're able to access and all that stuff. How does that all work?
Yes, I mean, I think my 2 slides, we have a demo coming up, and I'll show you exactly how it's managed. But in a nutshell, it works like Slack. So Slack has channels, the channels have users, and the users can communicate if they're members of the same channel. Same type of interface. We have multiple networks or network segments. In the segments, we can basically add members who are these nodes, servers or users or cloud services. And if you're in the same segment as somebody else, you too can communicate. So it's kind of like Slack for networking. I mean, there's a little more to it, and we'll get to it. But this is, in a nutshell, this is how the ACLs or the security is done.
Well, if someone watching or learn about Ananda for the first time and understanding the pain that I've come from because of all the stuff that we talked about before that I've had to pile on to make all this work, am I looking at this and going, okay, what am I going to have to deploy to make this work? Do I have to put hardware in my data center? I have to deploy more services into Amazon in my tenant? Do I have to then send my workers home with new VPN devices? What am I doing to make all this work from an organizational standpoint?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are a 100% software solution. So we don't require hardware. We don't require any proxies, obviously, like I said, and it's cloud managed. So you don't need to maintain your own cloud management, your management system at all. So essentially, the easiest way is just to install our client, and we have clients for Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android. You just deploy that. You define these networks on our cloud-based system, and we take care of all the networking, all the security to connect all these in the most optimal way per your networks and policies. So there's very little for you to do. It's all about using your commodity hardware, so you don't need to buy any expensive, SD-WAN type equipment, and still get the benefits of us optimizing your routing and your protocols to make it very, very efficient and actually probably exceed the speeds that you would have gotten with SD-WAN or VPN or any other type of solution.
So this doesn't mean I throw away my firewalls. What changes about how I deal with those once I deploy you?
Well, actually, you don't need to change anything. It's an overlay network. We don't even require you to open any firewall ports. This thing can make sure that all the directionality of the traffic is outbound. So it will probably connect regardless of any configuration that you make to the underlying network. So that's actually really important because a lot of time our customers are not, especially now starting enterprise-wide, they just have a use case to solve. Maybe have engineers connecting remotely and they want to solve that, or salespeople connecting, again, from some branch office. And so you don't want to change your entire enterprise infrastructure. You don't want to, deploy hardware, all these difficult things. So with Ananda, you just deploy it to a group of people, and as an overlay, it doesn't impact anybody else, and you can solve for that use case and then kind of expand slowly rather than try to kind of boil the ocean and replace everything in the enterprise. So there's nothing to replace. We can just kind of complement. If you have SD-WAN, but it doesn't work for the home, great. We'll kind of be your SD-WAN for the branch of one. If you have a VPN that doesn't quite work for a certain group because it's too slow, it doesn't really work with the cloud, we can replace that on a case-by-case basis. But there's no overall change that needs to be done.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go on. So as I said, it's a distributed network. That's a pretty unique architecture here. So there's a no backhaul. That's part of why it's so efficient and so fast. It's, as I said, self-optimizing. So both finding the ideal protocols, but also, if you can see, there are a couple of nitro relays, these yellow router-looking objects. And these are dynamically spun up across hundreds and hundreds of different public cloud POPs that we can deal with. So that's another way of kind of forcing better routing across the internet. And, that can bring another order of magnitude better performance compared to the default routing the internet would otherwise have given you. So that's something that's part of our product as well. And by the way, we have a big part of our technology is this kind of machine learning layer that figures out how to connect any of these 2 points optimally, which has to do with the protocol, and then deciding whether we need this kind of a nitro relay in between, and if so, deciding what's the ideal location to place it. Okay. Then obviously we have the security element here, so the self-defending element. So all these tunnels that you see are end-to-end encrypted. They're segmented, so if you were to port scan the network from the outside or even access between the different networks, you'll find nothing. There are no open ports. So all this kind of zero trust and segmentation is kind of built into how we build the network. And finally, the simplicity of it all, because all this is seamless for the end user. We take care of the routing, of the security. As far as you're concerned, if you're connecting from and of the bottom here to a server, you're in the LAN. You don't need to know anything else. And if that server has moved on to the cloud because you've migrated or moved back, doesn't matter. It's in a whole abstraction layer. So nobody needs to deal with reconfiguring VPNs and BGP routes and firewalls. That's just not something you need to deal with anymore.
So going back to your Slack analogy, the fact that you're zero trust would essentially indicate to me that you're starting with a clean sheet, which is good, in my book anyway. And so if you want this user A to be able to talk to user B or whatever, you have to make that happen, right? So you're not just putting everything in there and open by default or open anything by default. You're requesting the administrator to take proactive action and make sure that these two things are able to communicate with one another.
Right.
Perfect.
Yes,
Okay.
that's the difference between, like I said, an afterthought and something that's built in. So our network, when you build it, you decide who's allowed to talk to whom, to communicate with whom, and unless that's explicitly permitted, it's not allowed. This is a zero trust model. If you go to the regular, the old way of doing things, you first have a network, then you need to add the firewalls because now you need to start restricting stuff, right? Because it was never part of how you designed it. Or even worse, if you're trying to do segmentation and you use all these micro-segmentation tools and you need machine learning to figure out what the hell's going on. So it's much easier to have a clean slate versus doing that after the fact. So yeah, just to summarize this part, basically these are the three benefits. So speed up to 25 times faster than your old VPN because we're using this distributed network that doesn't backhaul traffic. We're using these Nitro optimizers to force a better route to the internet, and it also gives you better reliability because we can go past all these congestion or issues on the internet, so you get better resiliency. Then you have the security aspect of our network. As I said, zero trust, segmentation, encryption, also part of that layer. And finally, the simplicity, right? Being cloud managed, software only, no hardware, and then really taking out the need to have 10 different solutions to solve this problem by just using, this one layer. So this is this. So I think maybe I should show you a few minutes how it looks like, and then I think that would be quite self-explanatory here.
Yeah, let's do that. So while you pull that up, Scott, let's talk about last point there on replacing a number of different devices or technologies. What are some of the risks when you have a stack of 8 different devices that maybe replacing them all with one could fix?
Asking me?
Yeah.
Or yeah. I mean, obviously, any change management's become a thing for exactly the reasons that you're kind of alluding to. When you're thinking about 8 different devices, the assumption is that there's a best of breed approach to each one as well, and they're not all doing something general. And when you start to think about replace them all with one, what is that one not doing as well from an individual service standpoint that one of the other ones was doing? What risks are you introducing from a capacity perspective? Because if you've got 8 separate devices, you've probably got 8 separate CPUs, so there's a capacity issue as well. So I think there's a lot of risk to, in a vacuum, just saying, okay, we're going to go to one device. But if you're looking at something where, okay, we've already built sort of this infrastructure, it's not ideal necessarily because we've got, 8 different devices, but it's working. And so now we can think about something from an overlay perspective where we can run on top of something we already know that works and make it easier, faster, and more secure. And then over time, we can start looking at all of those services individually rather than just let's get rid of them all right now. So it starts. I think an approach as a CIO that I would take is, look at all of deploy something that makes it easier and faster and more scalable and all that other good stuff, especially to support work from home, get through the immediate need, and then, like I said, over time, start to do an analysis on the entire infrastructure and determine, based on what we've now done, what can we do to simplify the foundation that this new overlay can run on more efficiently.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to speak to any of those things, Adi, before you go into the demo. The one thought that I had, Scott, on the capacity thing is, I see what you're saying, but on the other hand, when you've got one box being your firewall, that's potentially a capacity issue where in a model where you've got a gazillion little things deployed here and there, it's almost less of an issue.
Failure.
And I think I've been trying to
You're
say
right.
that.
Yeah, the nice
Okay.
part about a box that does everything, you often have the ability to have a high availability failover standby, whatever you want to call it, that would work, and could potentially run in an active configuration to be giving more capacity as well. And it's probably harder to do when you've got those 8 separate devices. You have to try to maintain all of those different availability mechanisms as well.
Right, for sure.
It's funny, I was actually a founder. My first company was a UTM firewall company before Fortinet even coined that term. So we combined VPN firewall, antivirus, content filtering, all that stuff into one box. But that was, it's not best of breed, but it was a suite of functionality, right? This is not. Yeah. I think the beauty of what's elegant about what we do today, it's not a suite. We just we built the layer the right way, so it gives you all these benefits. It's not like we crammed a lot of different functionality inside. So I think it's a much more elegant way of getting the same benefit.
That makes a lot of sense.
What I like about what you've done is you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're not trying to tell the internet to go away and do something different. You're using this imperfect medium, and you're adding frosting, right? Like maybe the cake isn't completely well done, but the frosting looks awesome, and so you can get the cake. Nobody's going to know because you're hiding some of the imperfections and making the entire outcome better.
And to make it seem easy. We want to make it look easy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, let's do a demo.
So hey, let me show you. That's a great segue. So let me show you how easy it is.
There's cake in
the... So can you see my screen, my demo?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it's going to take about 2 minutes to show you how we can set up a new network. So this is the Ananda dashboard. It's a web-based console connected to our cloud control plane. So basically, there's a web interface. All you need to do is really define the users inside, and it's as easy as going here and adding a user and clicking create. Very, very straightforward. Obviously, we connect to the Oktas and Azure ADs and so on, so you can automate that very easily to get the users in. And you can also add servers, which are essentially the same as users, but there's tiny differences we don't need to go into right now. And then the only other thing you need to do is create your own network. So let's take a use case that we've seen customers ask for. Let's say they have an offshore development team in India. They want to connect it to the resources in California, to all these different clouds. All you need to do is basically create this new network object, which is like a Slack channel, right? So, engineering LAN. I basically pick the engineering team and the engineering in India. I pick my Jira server and let's take another server here, a bunch of other servers. And that's basically it. Once I hit create now, I have a new network, and it's just like a new LAN that's connecting all these people together as if it's a LAN. That's it. So it's incredibly fast. If you want to be a little more granular, we have a few other cool things, which is like you can restrict the protocols that you can use on the network. So maybe if it's an administrative network, you want to allow SSH and for everybody. And there's another cool aspect, which is called contextual access. So here I can basically go and associate a context. For example, saying you can only connect to these resources if you are within the United States. So, right, and maybe certain times of day, maybe certain operating system that I trust, and that's basically it. And I created all this granular security policy that's now associated with my new network. So I won't save it. And then basically, let me show you. Once I establish that, let me show you what happens as well. So I can obviously connect, and I prepared this ahead of time because we are on a video conference call, so I don't want to run a speed test while we're talking. So I just prepared it ahead of time, and this is Ananda now running against one of the common VPNs, and we just tested it around the San Francisco area here, as you can see.
Okay.
So it's not only connecting you, but it's way, way, way faster than the old VPN because we don't do the backhaul, we do better protocols, we optimize the routing. All that is just part baked into this network.
So the only thing that I think you didn't show in the demo is putting a client on the endpoint devices, right? Otherwise, you pretty much did everything it would take to build that network.
Yes.
This is a little bit of an embellishment, but not really. I did a 6-month contract to enable the use case that you just showed me. I probably could do it in 15 minutes if I had had this. That's
No, we
true
actually
story.
get the exact feedback from customers that they've tried for weeks and they tried the VPNs and SASE and SD-WAN and whatever they threw at the problem, fiber, and yeah, they just deployed in 15 minutes and it worked. So yeah, it's kind of disappointing because you spend all these energy, all these resources building it, and then it seems so easy, like nobody can appreciate how much work's go into it. But it's nice to make things simpler.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Okay. So I think if I'm not mistaken, you've got a couple slides left before we wrap up here.
Yeah, I just had a couple of use cases. One, we already touched on one use case, which is kind of this remote engineering team, remote branches, remote employees. That's pretty common, especially when they're remote and far away. Performance becomes a big deal. Obviously, security is always a big deal. So just making this so much easier, as you've seen. So basically taking this VPN and whatever you use with a VPN and replacing that. Another use case, I'll just go quickly, just in relation to SD-WAN. Like I said, there are a lot of companies have invested in SD-WAN. It's great when you're in the office. The problem is you're not. So what kind of we see as a big need now is let's extend it to wherever people are in their offices, remote branches, obviously from home. And this is basically, if you think about our networking functionalities, like SD-WAN functionality combined with security functionality in software. So you just can take this home and you have your SD-WAN for the branch of one. And that comes up a lot in our customer base as well. And very, very kind of a timely thing to be solving. So we're happy to be able to help companies connect when they need to. I have a few more, but I think you get the gist of it. Maybe one last thing to mention is the product tiers. I want you don't need to go to all these details here. The one point I want to make about this slide is that we actually have a free tier. So because we have this unique architecture where it's distributed, we're not building this huge backbone and data centers and trying to take your traffic and use our network as the data plane. Our cost of delivering the service is very low. This is why we can offer a free tier. So if there's a small company that just wants to connect a few different branches, a few different users, some clouds, we actually have a free tier. They can just use it. I mean, there's a lot of bells and whistles that we have that are not free, like the SAML integration and support. But if you just want to have some DevOps use case, some remote access use case, you're a small company, we encourage you to just use it. And kind of, as you grow, maybe you'll become buying customers, but we want to bring benefit to everybody.
Okay, so one of my parting questions was going to be how people could get a look at it or get their hands on it. So I guess the answer is try the community edition.
Go to our website. We have it.
That's fantastic. I don't have any more questions. Scott, is there anything you want to ask before we wind it down?
No, I think we're just about out of time.
Awesome. Well, Adi, this has been a blast. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. If you are watching and you want to learn more about Ananda Networks or go grab a copy of that, you can head over to their website. That is ananda.net. And if you want to keep up to date on what they're doing, follow them at Ananda Networks. And if you want to find out more about what we're doing at ActualTech Media, check us out at actualtechmedia.com or download some free Gorilla guides at gorilla.guide. Adi, Scott, thanks so much. It's been fun. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.